Hey everyone, this is Manly Badass Zero. I played Pocket Mirror not too recently. I had the playthrough on the channel. And I noticed a lot of people are confused by the storyline, or they just kind of get the ending but don't really get the overall plot and what I was trying to tell. And playing for the game, I kind of had a general gist of what the storyline was, and I played through it again, obviously, to get the ever ending, and I went over things as I went, and I actually even did some poking around on the files to kind of like put together an overall plot flow and what I think the storyline was trying to get towards. And obviously the storyline deals with a kind of multiple personality disorder or some kind of other issue with the main character. I think a lot of people got that much, but there's a lot of little nuances to it, and there's a bit of a supernatural element to it. So to help talk about that, I'm actually going to go through the game chapter by chapter, talking about things as I go, and I'll explain things about the various personalities and the girls that you meet, because they all play into the greater picture of what happened to this family specifically. So you start the first chapter in the same area as the demo. It's a relatively simple chapter, there's not much there, and I feel like this area wasn't really tied into the whole symbolism thing yet. It's like a very early developed area, you can kind of tell. The big key things are, there is some linkage to the Angel with some of the events, like the blood that's all over the room, as it's shown later, is actually from Angel coming in and smashing through the window and actually taking off one of her fingers in the process and leaving it behind, showing that she's been stalking since the beginning of the game. Aside from that, there's not too many plot reveals, but there is some foreshadowing as you get into the storyline a little bit. And I think this is really the major foreshadowing that you encounter in this chapter is, first off, you encounter a book. And it's not too long after you encounter this one blonde doll. And you find a diary called Little Goody Two Shoes. I feel like the story is very important, and it's actually the title of one of the endings, actually specifically the best ending. And there's a little bit something about that ending I'll go into later on, which I found by poking around in the files, that kind of actually explains what that ending actually is. But the main thing is, the story that you read is about a storyline called Little Goody Two Shoes, and it's about a girl who essentially is tempted to maybe possibly go into the woods and make a wish for something that's not quite human. And this girl, assumingly, is in a series of lack of wealth and probably like poverty or peasantry or something. And at the end of the book, you see this kind of upside down cross flash and this big grin, which might be very familiar if you've seen a certain ending. So you can obviously tell what the storyline's about. And I think this is actually foreshadowing a deal the mother made specifically, which kind of started this whole mess. I think this also kind of hints towards another thing, and that's the blonde doll, which I believe is connected to the Pumpkin King himself. It kind of looks vaguely like its humanoid form, and you never see it again after this, but it's kind of coincidental that this doll is here when you read this book, and it leaves right afterwards, and that's when the true game starts, after you're stuck into the mirror. The next big lore drop that comes in the overall low lore chapter, is when you actually go and do the puzzles. The first one is when you do the eye one, you read the book, and it talks about things like memories that I don't remember in a sense. I can't figure out who these belong to, and being observed by eyes, and kind of being trapped. This is, of course, foreshadowing the personality issues, and I actually think it foreshadows another ending and the state of our main character, which is that they are stuck in an asylum currently due to the events of the game. So this one actually outright kind of gives away the storyline a little bit, if you actually know what the endings and the main story is. And then you go into the art room, and the art room has many paintings about families killing each other, or things like that. I think this is also another foreshadowing about what happened to the family. And you also meet two paintings that are twins. They don't like each other, you're forced to kill one or the other. Well, specifically you're supposed to kill the southern one. This kind of parallels what happens towards the end with Angel and the main character, Goldia. And also kind of heavily foreshadows how all the personalities are at odds with each other, and they're actually quite violent with each other. So anyway, then we move on from the starting area to the dining hall, where we meet our doll friend. And we also pick up a golden regalia on the way. You're forced to pick this up, you cannot skip it like the others. And in contrast to the other golden regalia, you don't have to do anything to earn this one. It's instantly given to you, and there's no like character development or anything, or coming to terms with self done here. And I think that's supposed to be partially because you're dealing with a doll. The doll itself is not part of your personality, and anything, it's a friend. It's a way for the main character to seek comfort and kind of have a companion and deal with their personality issues, which might be a little supernatural in nature. And so it gives us a golden regalia. It's already your friend since the beginning in a sense. There's no like need to seek out any special backstory or anything. But for the most part, this chapter is antics. There is a secret room in the dining hall where there's a bunch of the dolls kind of scattered about. I'm not really sure what this means. It could just be a way of saying like it's just a doll in the end. It's not its own living thing. Or it could just be there to freak you out. I don't know. For the most part, there's not much else that portrays anything into the storyline here. There is the one riddle that, of course, means the heart, but that's like, I feel like should be generally obvious with the locket representing the heart and whatnot, especially since you keep it around that area if you're wearing it. But mainly this area is just designed to seem kind of quirky and scary at the same time, and just establish the overall atmosphere that the rest of the game is going to go for. But there is one important thing that happens almost to the tail end of this chapter, and it's you get the first feeders showing, with our guest the Pumpkin King, who stalks you throughout the game. And like most demons, the Pumpkin King's goal is ambiguous. We don't even know if they're actually called the Pumpkin King, but we know that they are the Pumpkin King, at least to the pumpkins anyway. The demon obviously wants to claim your soul, but at the same time I feel like it's a little bit chaotic and is kind of trying to see where you end up. Do you end up accepting yourself and end up redeeming your soul, or do you fall and get swallowed up? There is one small thing though. At the start of this feeder, he does say, keep your memories close to your heart. Which may not sound like much, but when you think about, he's basically outright saying all these little feeder showings are your memories. And it's indirectly a way for telling you to embrace your actual memories, because every single one of these memories is yours. They're not just separate people. So you go for the feeder showing. It's mostly straightforward. It shows a spoiled little girl, Fleda, playing with the doll. And I do think there is a sins kind of theme running through. The whole game kind of has a Dante's Inferno journey trip here. And I would say that Angel actually kind of represents Virgil in some senses. But it's not quite literal, but there is a slight overall sin, I feel like, linked to each of the characters, with Fleda obviously being greed and possibly gluttony at the same time. But it goes through. This is another aspect of our main character, Goldia's personality. And this part of the personality is kind of the denial part of her personality. The denial of what actually happened and what she was capable of doing and what she did. Because at the end of the feeder thing, she goes into the room and reads the letter. And the letter is the truth of the events. And she thinks they're lies because, of course, first off, she doesn't believe she does that because this is a separate personality. And second off, like I said, it's a denial. And it's a kind of forcing of blame, saying, oh, it's this girl who did this thing. And of course, the one who did it, as you see in the silhouette, is our little friend with scissors here. And this links into what that personality represents, which I'll get into when I get to her chapter. So the chapter goes on, there's more hijinks, and then you get over to Agliette, who's been essentially crucified by Lisette. And throughout this entire game, Lisette kind of stalks you also, aside from the demon. And Lisette's a bit of a chaotic factor also, where I believe Lisette's out to get you, but at the same time Lisette also wants to protect you, and also helps you indirectly a few times and wants you to see the truth. And I believe the letter here actually kind of references that, where it mentions a traitor in disguise and lies. It's kind of like saying, we were the one who did it, and you just kind of scapegoated all into me, this alternate personality. There's one more small thing I kind of picked up on as I played this, if you notice. When you get to the keys, there's 3 keys. And the correct one, of course, is the heart key. That's golden and whatnot, and matches the theme. The wrong ones are the moon key, and this one has little devil wings. And the reason those are obviously the wrong ones is the devil key kind of represents the devil figure, possibly the Pumpkin King, and that kind of influence throughout. And also because the devil in tarot kind of represents temptation. And the moon key is wrong because the moon represents confusion and kind of illusion of being led astray. So both of those keys are the wrong ones. The right one is the one following your heart. And throughout this entire game, you see the moon symbolism a lot. And like I said, that what the moon represents, it kind of fits the theme. So you go throughout this new chapter with your friend Fleda, who you find. And for the most part, it's mostly hijinks. There's a couple of things of the reason there's pumpkins everywhere is you find out that she lost the game with the Pumpkin King. And we already know who the Pumpkin King is. It's not that scarecrow that's being burnt up. That's just representation. Kind of like the scarecrow being burnt up from Nightmare Before Christmas. And of course, we also find that she's extremely spoiled and tries to act like a little perfect princess. And I feel, like I said, aside from the whole denial thing of the possible events of the game, she's also supposed to represent a bit of greed on the main character's part, and especially since the main character possibly came from poverty, she may have like a desire to be that kind of spoiled princess a bit, because it's an extreme contrast. So that's a little bit of that aspect there. Okay, so the chapter continues on, and we get to the library, and there's actually a big and more important plot point here. We get another book, and there's like a big trend of this game of all the books being big reveals of the storyline. And it's called A Boy's Midnight Journey, and it's by, I can't actually pronounce his name fully correctly, but I'm just going to say Henry. I believe this name is important. It's going to come up again later. I'll point out later when it comes up again. And it's about a boy who hears voices during the middle of the night and talks to possibly the dead or other spirits or something. And it gets to the final part where it says, "No one around him will ever know about the secret of his. Such a privilege belongs only to me, my dear." And you see once again the upside down cross, which represents the Pumpkin King. The whole story connected to the Pumpkin King is actually pretty vague, and I don't think it's fully explained within this game, because the next work of the creators is going to be something that kind of fills in that storyline a bit, so I feel like they've kept that purposely vague and we can't make a concrete answer on the Pumpkin King's full backstory, but this might be an important linking to it. So then we continue on once again. Some more hijinks happen, like as always, and you find a secret diary, which tells the backstory of Fleda. And of course, since Fleda is you, this is actually kind of your backstory. And you get some key things in here. The mother has been staying in her room all the time almost. The father is away. Our main character feels pretty lonely, which of course leads to the whole manifestation of the fake childhood friend and the doll. And also that the brother spends too much time writing on his own. So I guess we assume that the brother is into writing. And then it goes on, and then we find out that the father is a soldier. He's been off to war more than once, and he's back to war again after leaving the doll. And the rest of it's just kind of fluff that explains the various areas you've been through. So after reading this, stuff happens. Fleda basically plays some games with you and stuff, and you find the secret letter that was in her house, at least a part of it anyway. And this is written by the mother, because as it says towards the end, mother will not be able to accompany her little girl in her painful journey, but please, and it gets cut off. But it does make some mention of sins and something that's been done that's going to affect Goldia's life and possibly the entire family. But after doing this, Fleda gets pissed off, locks you away, you get trapped, and you pretty much only escape with the help of Lisette and her scissors. And you kind of see, like I said, she's been kind of stalking you, both helping you and impeding you at the same time. And she leaves a letter behind where it says, "You took my most precious belonging from me. It's only fitting I do the same." And what that is, I'll get into when I get to her chapter. So you escape, you end up in another garden, and as you approach up, it's a little small thing, it should be kind of fairly obvious. You see 3 statues with Fleda in the middle, and you see 2 smashed ones, which are both Lisette and our other blind character, which I'll get into later. And they've been, one particularly, which is Lisette, has been especially smashed, showing how, like I said, Fleda is about denial. Like, I'm a perfect princess, these aren't part of me. But as you go to the top, you see a statue of yourself with a crown, showing that she does kind of value you, in the sense that you are the original, have the original personality. You are the queen, in a sense. So, after the main confrontation with Fleda kind of is over, you see the first outcome of what happens to these characters as you meet them. And as you learn to actually accept them, they shatter. And they actually get pretty scared usually, saying that you're going to leave me again, and this and that. And it kind of shows how our main character has locked himself away mentally, for one, in their asylum. It's also how these other personalities, and if you deny them and you outright get rid of them, in a lot of ways it's pretty much like killing another person. It's not literal, like the main body is still there, but as far as that personality is concerned, they're gone. That consciousness is dead. So they shatter in the end, when you learn to accept them. Now, what accepting them means actually has a variation depending on which ending you end up getting. So if you get the ending where you essentially become Kami Madoka, then that has an entirely different meaning than the true end does when it comes to accepting your personalities. So you proceed through the chapter, you encounter Lisette in a maze of mirrors, and as we know from the final area, mirrors are highly associated with Lisette. And I think this is partially because of the looking upon yourself kind of thing. They remember everyone's denying Lisette, denying their existence, and blaming them for everything. And that's why they kind of come out of the mirror, because when Goldie looks into the mirror, Lisette is essentially herself. So anyway, we proceed through our next level of spiritual hell, and we meet our next personality/friend girl, who is possibly, I believe their name is pronounced, there's different ways to pronounce his name depending what part of the world it's from. It could be Harpe or Harp, and they are blind, which is an important theme of theirs, and I think they also represent the sin of sloth. And they represent it very strongly, as they don't want to do anything. They don't want to rock the boat, they don't even necessarily chase after you and try to kill you. All their repentance even involve like sleeping or things like that. And I also think they might represent pride, because they seem to have like a lot of pride throughout the chapter about protecting you and everything, and I have to do this. They also have a third meaning, in that they are a motherly figure. And I believe they actually do represent your mother a little bit, and I think that's kind of where this personality stemmed from originally. But I'll get into Harpe a little more as we go through and when we see the next feature. Just pay attention to some key things in the dialogue as you play through the game about being a guardian angel, and I'm here to protect you, and don't ignore that, and ignore that other girl, she's very troubled. But I will say this is actually probably the most important chapter in the entire game that actually talks about the storyline. And it's because, frankly, it's because it's got a lot of books. I'll say that. So anyway, you go for the chapter, and the first big, weird, little quirky thing is, as you're approaching the hall, you hear people talking. And it's between a little girl and what they believe is her father. And I think this is Goldia with her father here. And this is an important flashback. I think all the flashbacks within this house take place after whatever deal might have been made with the Pumpkin King/Devil. That's my overall theory on that. Okay, so here we go. You get into the library. And I'm going to be talking about this whole library section a lot, because a lot of things are revealed here and a lot of things you can piece together here. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is this letter to a sergeant. Sergeant Major Roman Pretty Hillig, which is actually the father. And as we know, the father is a soldier, that's why we know it's him. And have you seen his last name before? Looks familiar, right? We saw it earlier in reference to a book about maybe a certain Pumpkin King. But in this letter, they talk about, in regards to your daughter's behavior during tutoring classes, that she's not very healthy, a tendency for violence and outbursts and all sorts of things, ripping off books, scribbling, tantrums, which is a various personalities kind of manifesting, and this actually even gets self-destructive towards the end. So we know Goldie has these issues, it's manifested in her. We know that the father knew about it, and there's also another little thing, I'm not sure. There is mentioning that during one of the diaries that the tutor had like a spontaneous collapse or something. This might have even been that Devil's doing, because the letter does cut off, but I think it's because Goldie doesn't stops reading it. But it could have been a way of, it had bad intentions, was resigning, and somehow the kind of evil forces around Goldie somehow smited this tutor. But anyway, you go for the rest of the library. All these are actual, historical, real books. Almost, anyway, except for the few lore ones. And they all have to do with psychology. With children specifically. With the type of diagnosis of personality disorders or anything like that. They all have to do with it, and we know why, obviously, because of the way the storyline's theme is. It gives away the main twist of the storyline if you haven't figured it out already by this point in the game. If not, it's one of those kind of, you encounter it later and it kind of like clicks in your head and you're like, oh, that's what those were for. But for the most part, those are just foreshadowing things. The real meat and bones, like I said, are the little lore photo letters. And there's another one. And this one is about a girl named Elise, who has also mental health issues, and they're being diagnosed. They have nightly visions, they have imbalances of bodily humors and melancholia, and of course you see the last name there, I forgot to mention, it's the same family as Goldia. Here we go. So this is obviously the mother. And it says here, patients should spend days at ease with monitored comes from a thin white wine and soothing music. This is why the mother was locked in her room the entire time, and this is kind of referencing that. There's also another letter here, where they talk about never intending to break a family apart, a twist of fate, and becoming unable to tolerate outbursts of madness, and something about a vile being's plaything in this whole family, and taking responsibility for their actions as a final loving gesture. The final part's a little weird because it says, I owe all the affection I could ever give you were you to live any longer. So it's a little vague who this could be. This could be the mother again, it could even be the father, or even could be the brother. So to piece that together, we actually have to go to the gramophone and we have to kind of look at them and read them in order. So the first wax record is the mother, and it's referencing the sin she's committed of making a deal with this devil. It's taking her daughter's name, which is Goldia, and it's kind of cursed the family here. So this would be Elise talking. The second wax record is our little devil friend here, the Pumpkin King, talking to Elise and taunting them. And here's the third one, a secret sheriff mother. So this one's about the brother. It's about how they've made a deal with the devil also, since they've taken their hand, and as he says, if he so wishes, we may be able to meet again someday. So the brother is not completely gone. The devs have said that the devil is not, or the Pumpkin King is not her brother. They've said that. They have not necessarily clarified or denied if it's possessing his body, or it has his soul or anything. So I do think the brother's somewhere connected to the Pumpkin King Devil, whatever they are. So the fourth wax record is the father this time, who's going to be going throughout the entire family. And he's lost without Elise. He's been getting to liquor and women and everything. I'm not sure if this implies that Elise has already passed away, or if Elise is mentally gone and he is kind of indulging in these other things. The final one is probably the most vague and most curious. It mentions fates and a name we haven't really heard before, Rosine. Something about a faithful meeting in the woods, which of course is the meeting of the Pumpkin King, and I believe this is the mother. So the mother possibly has a childhood friend. If the next game comes out, this might actually deal with this final wax record and like the whole storyline of the Pumpkin King. But most importantly of all, is we know the entire family's name now. We have Roman, who is the father. We have Elise, who is the mother. We have our main character, who is Goldia, which you find out at the end of the game. And then we have the brother, who is Henry. And we know that Henry is a writer. We know that there's a book talking about a boy who sees and kind of hears things at night and talks to other beings, written by a Henry. So Henry has become a writer, or became a writer when they're growing up. And at some point, of course, her fate gets cut off by a devil thing.